What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Axe Creation. Today we're going to be taking a look at some Meshuggah riffs, and hopefully by doing so, it gives you the ability or some insight on how we can manipulate your own riffs or their riffs and how they work against a quarter note pulse. So the purpose of this lesson is to not necessarily teach you how to play these specific riffs, but to show you these riffs that hopefully they give you an insight on how to manipulate against the quarter note pulse, which is a lot of what's going on with these Meshuggah riffs, especially these examples that I'm showing you. So let's take a look at the first example from Autonomy Lost. So when we break down this riff, like in a micro analysis kind of way, you can look at it as the riff is basically in 9/8, right? So you have this phrase, which is in 9/8. If I just do that once to give you the 9/8 feel, you get the, okay? That's the 9/8 measure. So you're gonna play that 3 times. And then on the 4th time, you're just going to cut it short, and essentially that's 5/8, and you get this. Right? So that spans 5/8. So now, what happens when you add all that together? You get 4 bars of 4/4. Brilliant. So you can look at it in the sense where you're playing this polymetric feel, 9/8, 5/8 against the 4/4 feel, but I personally, you don't necessarily have to think about it that way, even though when you break it down, that's what's going on. Right? You can think about it in a sense where every time you play this beat, this riff, it's going to shift over by an 1/8 note, right? The first time you play it, it's on the downbeat of 1. The second time you play it, it's on the upbeat of 1. And then it's going to be on the downbeat of 2, and then it's going to be on the upbeat of 2. So, as I said, playing against the beat, against the quarter note pulse is what's important here. So not necessarily breaking it down in a polymetric kind of sense, right? So as I said, you have this. Right? And they cut the riff short to make it fit within the 4, within the allotted time span. So as you play through this riff, it's important, or maybe it helps, maybe it's helpful, not necessarily important, that instead of trying to feel the 9/8 and the 5/8, you feel it as a quarter note pulse, and you feel the riff every time you play it start on a downbeat and start on an upbeat. And that will strengthen your ability to play against a quarter note pulse. So let's look at our next example, which is going to be Marrow from their latest album. I actually like this riff a lot. It's one of my favorite riffs on the newest album, and it's pretty straightforward. It's essentially straight quarter note feel. Got some tied notes, some upbeat notes. It's pretty cool. But the length of the phrase, it falls 1 note short of a full 4 measures of 4, and so it's going to start again on that last beat of that measure. So when it repeats, everything is shifted against the drum beat, which is a really cool effect. So as we play it, right, we have the main notes are on 13, 11, and 10. And that's our phrase, right? So it's basically 13, 11, 10, and then back up 10, 11, 13, and then 13, 10. So like I said, it starts on the last beat of the fourth measure, and then it repeats, and then what happens is it shifts everything forward, and you have to add more beats. So they end up playing just a couple extra notes to make it fill in. And then the band kicks in. So what happens when the band kicks in? You just play the main phrase 4 times, and again, it's slowly shifting over, which gives a really cool effect against the drums, which are kind of maybe more steady. And then at the end, you're left with this 8th measure that they just have to fill in the gaps, which you heard when they fill. Right? And that's when the gap is full. The slides sound great. Right? So the first time they add the extra 013, and after the band kicks in and right before the verse starts, it's 013, 012. Right? Straight 4, straight ahead. But again, it's this great ability to know where the beat is and know how to manipulate it, not necessarily worrying about polymeters and all this other stuff that's going on or not going on. Right? So let's look at our next 2 examples to get a little more complicated to feel. The first 2 are a little straightforward, and the next example is going to be rational gaze. So like I said, for rational gaze, the idea here is a little more complicated because when you break it down to that micro-analysis of the phrase of the riff, it ends up being, I believe, 25/16 notes it falls into place, which is, you don't feel 25/16, right? But the beauty about that is if you double it up and play it 2 times in a row and feel it that way, you're going to start it on a downbeat and you're going to start it on an upbeat. And that's the important thing that's going on here, because you're feeling a downbeat and an upbeat against a constant quarter note pulse, right? And you play the riff 4 or 5 times through, and then you make a little fill to make it fit, and then the second time around, they cut it short. So the fill of the riff, right, that's the main riff. Right? And it's just 13 and open, and you're doing some hammer-ons. All right? So like I said, 25/16, you don't feel it as 25/16. I don't think about it as some polymetric idea where it's 25/16 and that's what I'm feeling, or if you double that, you get 50/16 and then cut that in half, or 25/8. It's awkward. You can think about it how it goes 1 measure into a 5th measure of 4. Right, so you're starting further than you would, say, on the downbeat of after the 4th measure, like you would a normal pop rock song, right? You get 4 bars of things that are going on. And to me, that's the better way, not the best way. That's how I look at it. Maybe it makes sense to you. All right? So let's take a look at our next example, which is similar concept to this, which is a New Millennium Cyanide Christ. So this one is similar to the sense in rational gaze, because you get this awkward polymetric thing when you break down the actual phrase of the riff. I believe it's 23/16 notes is the span of the riff. And again, you don't necessarily feel it as 23/16. It's awkward. Nobody feels that, right? But it's the same thing where if you double that up, the riff is going to start on the downbeat and start on an upbeat. And again, that's what's important here. You're shifting accents up and down against the quarter note pulse. So if we break down the riff, right, that's how it lasts. So you basically play, right, and now it starts over. So that'd be the 1 time. So essentially you can go through that 5 times, and then on the 6th time, you take one of them out and you just trim it down a little bit to make it fit in their span of 8 measures. You know, there's still a nice organized, we play this riff 4 times, we play this riff 8 times, or 4 measures and 8 measures, right? And if it's not gonna fit, let's make it fit. Cutting it short, adding in a turnaround. And essentially that's what's going on. So I hope this helps. Again, strengthen your rhythmic ability to manipulate a quarter note pulse, because that's kind of the point. That's what I wanted to, hopefully I got across in this lesson. I tabbed out these riffs. Their link is down in the description, so please check that out. Learn the riffs from yourself. If you don't have an A string, you can still play on your 6 string, on your 7 string. Obviously, you just can't pop on the CD and play along with it. So, as always, let me know what you come up with. Until then, I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.